Welcome, students, to week 4. Okay, so the kind of 3 goals of this unit, or the 3 things that you should be able to do by the end is identify the difference between founding myth and founding fact. And this is going to include being able to talk about what kind of some of the founding myths are and what actually happened. And then I want you to be able to describe why founding myths exist and when we might use them or when they might be useful. And then the third thing I want you to be able to do by the end of this unit is explain the sequence of events that leads to people dying in Lexington and Concord, right? So we have been talking this whole last week and even the weeks before that about like who colonial Americans were and the tensions they were kind of having with Great Britain. But I want you to remember that in 1765, when the French and Indian War ends, Americans or colonists living in America considered themselves British citizens, and they were pretty happy with the relationship they had with their government. And just 10 years later, they're like, nope, and people are dying in the streets. So I want you to be able to explain kind of what happens over that 10-year period and what ends up becoming the American Revolution. Okay, so little bit about your notes this week. You have your vocabulary section, just like you had last week. And then for each of these events that we're talking about this week, I've got kind of a graphic organizer for you. So I want you to tell me who was involved. So this is going to be people's names, what happened, just like a brief kind of summary of it, and then when and where it happened. So this doesn't have to be super specific, but knowing that like this happened in New England or this happened in Massachusetts will be helpful. Then I want you to tell me why it happened. So kind of some of the events that led up to it, the causes, and then why we remember it. So why is it important? That kind of stuff. So you'll do that for the Boston Tea Party. You'll do that for the First Continental Congress. You'll do that for Paul Revere and the Midnight Ride. And then you'll do that for Lexington and Concord and the shot heard around the world. Our last assignment this week is actually going to be next week. You'll be working on it. And it's about Thanksgiving and myth and the American Revolution. And so this space down here is for you to kind of take notes on that. I will talk about it with you on Thursday at the discussion session. So make sure that you come to that if you possibly can, because it will make your life a lot easier. The other thing I wanted to talk about on this assignment is, I remembered, the notes are optional. I am not going to make you turn them in, but if you are shooting for the 4, if you're like gunning for a really deep, rich understanding of the content, doing the notes is going to help get you there. So if you are just struggling right now, like if you're having a super, super stressful time and you're like, I'm just going to do the bare minimum, just doing the quizzes is going to be enough for you. But if you are shooting for that 4, you want that deep, rich understanding that's going to help kind of set you off really well for high school and for college and things like that. And I'm going to highly, highly recommend you do the notes because they're going to help set things in your brain. Just listening and clicking on the ABCD answers and the quizzes is not going to help set it very much. And so if you want to like have stuff stick so you can remember it, that is what the notes here are for. It's to help make it stick in your brain so that you have this background knowledge, because the reason you have to take this is because this background knowledge is important, right? Like it's not just stuff that's like whatever. Doesn't really matter if I understand about the American Revolution. It does really matter because it affects our lives today. And I'm hoping as we go through this unit, you'll be able to see like, oh, I can see how this affects our lives today. But if you're still struggling with that, I want you to think about how the Sons of Liberty relate to some of our modern political movements that we see going on today, whether that's big political parties like the Republicans or the Democrats, or smaller political movements like some of the ones that we get hear about in Twitter and stuff like that. So that could be Black Lives Matter. That could be some of the MAGA groups that are very, very popular and things like that. So think about how they relate to today. The other thing I want you to think about is if you were in charge, so if you were the British Parliament, what could you have done differently to stop the revolution from happening, right? England didn't want to lose their colonies. Their colonies were important, but they made some key mistakes that led to the people who were part of those colonies wanting independence. So I want you to think a little bit about that. Like if I were in charge, what could they have done differently that would have made a different outcome?